You will kick it off. Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's conversation, part of our fundraising strategy series, Psychological Challenges and How to Brace for Impact, or Brace for Them. My name is Daniel Nzueto. I welcome all pronouns, and I serve as a community engagement manager at StartOut. I'm excited to welcome you to today's event. If this is your first time attending one of our workshops, welcome, and know that StartOut's mission is to increase opportunity and success for LGBTQ plus entrepreneurs. I'm grateful to welcome back our hosts for today's session, Karan and Divya from Joyous Studios. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Danny. And it's nice to be back. For those who are just meeting me, my name is Karan Singh, as Danny was saying, and this is the fourth of this series that we've been doing around how do you think about fundraising? And this one, as I kind of hinted at last time, we would think a little bit more about the psychological challenges. One of the things that came up as we were ending last session was how can you be better prepared, and how can to what you know is going to come. And I think as we were thinking about what does that mean, it really is that there are certain challenges that you can predict that you really know are waiting. And so what can you do about them? Um, to give a little brief introduction to the studio, though, I am a co-founder with Divya, who's joining me today, of Joyous Studio, which is a storytelling consultancy. We bring together different kinds of people, designers, investors, builders, artists, to tell these different stories. We feel that there's a sense of fulfillment that you can get in finding products and finding companies that really resonate with who you are, that resonate with your values. And part of that is helping people and those companies tell their stories in a way that people can connect with them. And that's what we're very excited to do. So as those who have come for my sessions before, I love to kind of just start off with a little bit of a question to frame us. So I know we're not that many of us so far, but if you could just take a second or two or a couple of minutes and think about this question, especially even for those of us who haven't gone out and started fundraising yet, what is the things that feel exhausting when you think about that process? And this is something we'll come back to. You're not going to be asked to share it right now, but I'd love to kind of see. So I'll give everyone a minute or two just to write some thoughts into the chat. And I'll bring it up so I can actually see the thoughts if they get written. Cool. And I'll give people another few minutes, and you guys can also just keep adding them in at any point. But one of the times that fundraising felt very challenging, very exhausting for me, and for those of us who've come to some of the sessions I did earlier in this year, you know that I recently joined the board of Tomboy X, which is a queer underwear brand out of Seattle, started by two people who start out as actually recognized Fran Dunaway and Naomi Gonzalez. And the process in which I ended up joining the board was that Fran and I did a recapitalization of the company successfully. But part of that meant going back out to people who had asked, who had originally supported the company, right? These were the original investors. These are people on our cap table. And we wanted to go out and ask them, as we are doing this recapitalization, would they put more money into the business? And there was this one conversation where we had gone to go meet the person who was the very first person, right? She was the person who had written the very first check back in like 2012 or 2013 when Fran and Naomi had started this business. And we're having this conversation, and over the course of this conversation, the conversation does not go well. Over the course of the conversation, she like gets very upset with me, or very upset, right? She's very mad. She asked for some specific info around what happened to her original investment and that value of that investment today, which I did not have like close to hand. I wasn't able to like. I kind of walked her through, as I'll talk about in a few minutes. And it also ended in this moment where maybe I will actually this. So somehow, because I wasn't prepared to kind of answer her question about her original investment, I ended up telling her what her percentage ownership was at the time she invested. And now I had led her into this conversation I really don't want to be having with her, right? Because when you're doing a recapitalization, which is like a type of down round, that means the business that was worth something is now worth much less than it was before. And for these particular people, there was a moment when their shares, like let's say that she had invested at say $20,000, okay, and there was a moment those shares are probably worth about $60,000, and they had an opportunity to sell them. And now we're coming and saying, hey, this company is now worth much less. Your shares are worth $6,000, right? So already that's a hard conversation to have. But when you're now hearing like, oh, I used to own 1% of this business and now I own 0.5% of this business, that's even more kind of difficult sometimes because that feels viscerally a lot less. So I like this conversation ends by me having led her to a place that I don't really, it's not clear what to do next, right? Like we're in this moment where we have a conversation, it's not gone super well, it's gone okay. And it's like, now what, right? So the very first thing that you want to keep in mind is that you have a set of follow-ups, or you want to create a set of follow-ups. So even when you're thinking about what kind of things you make sure you want to get to and get hitting in that conversation, create those moments for follow-ups for yourself. So in my case, right, she had asked me for how many shares and the average price of those shares. And I didn't have that immediately to hand because she had ended up there was her investment was over like a round or two, and then I think she had bought some shares from like a person who was exiting, so it was just complicated, right? So here I immediately had a follow-up I could come back with 24 to 48 hours. I could be like, hey, you bought this many shares at this price, this many shares at this price, and so your average purchase price is this, and what does that look like today, right? Like what is the value of those shares today? Then if there you can seed moments, and even if they're like emotionally hectic, let's say, moments, right? If there's certain moments that come up in the conversation that feel like places that can be interest, that they've exhibited interest, those are great things to follow up with. So in my case, they were, I'm trying to think if there was anything really that had come up. Um, there were some questions that had come up around like what has happened with similar businesses, and right, those were information that I didn't have as close to hand. It was kind of offhand things. This person actually was in real estate, and we were really hoping to kind of get her to introduce us again to her twin sister. Obviously, this conversation didn't go that well, so that didn't end up happening. But there was right. So I would maybe have reached for things that maybe had come up around like facts there. Maybe if they were, they're in real estate, like things there. But the third thing that can also be really useful to use as follow-up is people they care about, right? So the person who you got the introduction from, the person, if you can get an introduction from them, people who they have introduced you to, or just people in their sector or industry that they might have some feelings about, these again can be a place to follow up. The reason why I'm stressing this so much is because one of the challenges you're going to face is being ghosted. And it's just par for the course, right? Like you cannot conclude that because someone does not respond to your email that they are not interested, right? I've called out 4 different things here, right? People are busy, they've not seen the message, they've not been able to deal with it at the moment they read it, they forgot about it, or the fourth one is they've decided it's not worth responding. And we're too quick to jump to that last one, right? So part of why I'm spending the time to kind of, my first things I really hope you guys walk away with is keep in mind different ways, different things that you can use to generate a reason to follow up, so that you don't conclude that you are being ghosted, or you don't conclude you're being ghosted because because the idea or proposition is not worth it, until you have had enough moments, created enough moments that you actually can really have spent time to reach that conclusion. That said, of course, there will be moments it's time to cut your losses, right? So in certain conversations, right? Like in this one, I sent a bunch of these follow-ups, right? I sent her the information she was looking for. I sent her some information about other early investors that I knew she was new. I didn't get a response to any of them. Eventually, Fran got a response that she felt that this lady felt I was very rude, and she didn't want to have to keep dealing with me because she felt that I had made this big mistake. And when I had presented the story to her, in my effort to try and make it seem like that it was a great opportunity to invest now, I had made it clear that the people who invested now in this recapitalization would do the best, right? They were the people that would make the most money. And it's because in a down round, if you invest in a down round, you will make a lot of money, right? Like a business is under siege, it's under stress for some reason, and the value of that business has come down. Yes, Molly, it's being recorded. Uh, so the value of that business has come down. So that means if you as an investor are coming in at that point, you are going to see a larger share of the eventual returns. Hopefully there is a return. And to make that a little bit more clear, give you guys another example, I'll just stay with my Tomboy X example. So there was a point that business was valued, I think, around $35 million. At the point we did the recapitalization, that business was now valued only at $5 million, and we put in $5 million. So that meant 50% of the resultant company, of the company, the post-money company, as it's called, went to the new investors. And that means that for all of the previous investors, even the ones that owned, maybe 30% of the company before, now they own half of that because all of those previous old investors now only own 50% because 50% had to go to the new money of the down round. So, right, I unfortunately stressed this too much to this lady. And so she felt like it was really rude that I was not being able to do this in a way that I was taking care of the people that had really been there. And yes, it's easy for us to be like, oh, they're not sophisticated investors. They should have been anticipating that you can lose money and that down rounds occur, right? Sure, right. But at the end of the day is that meeting was not successful for us. We were not able to kind of get an introduction. We weren't able to get her to become a customer again, right? So eventually it comes to that last thing, which is stop chasing, right? Your time, especially in a fundraising moment, because you cannot be fundraising forever. It is so painful, and we forget how much impact it is on your business. Like when your thoughts and your mind and your brain space are being sucked away into thinking about how you're going to make yourself shiny enough for the next person and what you're going to do to polish the story over here, those are energies that are not being spent running your business. So you've got to look at your time as valuable, and you've got to look and say that there's a certain point where it is time to stop chasing, right? And I'm giving you some outs, if you will, here, right? Like sometimes get an introduction, you feel like some return on the investment. Sometimes you got them as a customer, right? You feel like a return on the investment, and then stop, right? Like there's a point to call it. Might drink some water. Where'd my bottle go? One sec. So how do you not get into that moment though, right? And that's also a great thing to kind of think about. Um, so when you start to feel like the conversation is going in different directions, there's different strategies that you have to try and get yourself to a place where you feel like you're actually getting a warm reception. So redirecting is a great strategy, right? So there's some parts that always come up. So for me, it's like this is a kind of a funny one, but people always tell me like, "Oh, you have such a great smile," right? What are they really saying? Is they're saying you're great at being warm. And so something I can fall back on is being warm, right? Like when I feel like the conversation is going in a direction that I'm not comfortable, or we're starting to head in a place that makes me feel like this is not helpful, I can fall back on what I feel like are my strengths, even my personal strengths. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think that a lot of times we forget that we are there. It's not just the company story that you're pitching. You are a big part of it, and some things about yourself, even if you are not as confident about parts of your company. So just keep that in mind, right? Like, there's some parts of you that people always talk about, or every time you tell your company story, people are always amazed that you can do this aspect of it. Those are your shiny moments. Those are your things you bring up and be like, hey, I know I really want to acknowledge the points over here. This is really great. Can we cut? But I also feel like I want to spend some time just underscoring for you what we've built here and why this is so incredible. Trust. It's coming to that second point too, right? You don't, just because someone has brought something up, you don't have to spend a bunch of time there. Divya was telling me about how she was in this design review a couple of weeks ago, and they were having an investor conversation as part of this. And one of the investors they were talking to was like, where is the search bar going to be in this app? And it's like, okay, right? Like we can spend time explaining to you, but search is a very solved paradigm. Like, yes, there's a way that you can build search and it'll be on the top bar and it'll be part of the navigation, but it's a relatively solved paradigm. We don't need to be spending a bunch of, that's not understanding that with that investor is not going to make you seem special, right? It's going to help them feel reinforced that they can ask a question that then you spent time responding, but it's not going to make you seem special. So redirect it to a place that's going to make you seem good and that you have depth and that you can keep talking there, but it's going to be valuable to you. And then finally, this is kind of related to that last point. I mean, they're all about redirecting, but seed the questions, right? Something that we did on one of the Tomboy decks is that we would just mention Victoria's Secret, because then we would seed questions about why is women's underwear even an opportunity? Like, doesn't everyone just buy Victoria's Secret? And here is a place that we could talk about, why Victoria's Secret is not 90% of their customers' underwear drawer, right? Whereas Tomboy is, right? And yes, the Tomboy customer maybe only buys one silhouette, right? Like they figured out, 3-inch boy briefs are their preferred thing, and that's what they buy. But we are the vast majority of their underwear drawer. And now suddenly I've taken this from a conversation about, oh, yes, you want to talk about Victoria's Secret and their sexiness, and now I can take that conversation and frame it in a way that makes my story seem stronger. How much of the underwear drawer do they control versus I control? And a very strongly resonant message. But sometimes you will still get into these moments, right? Where someone is rude, they're angry, they're aggressive. But these are the things to keep in mind, right? The reactions are about them. You need to get out and, say the thing you need to say, but you also need to be able to get up and do it tomorrow, right? And you need to be able to do it the day after that. So how do you keep the resilience to be able to do it? And yes, one thing is be able to, write a nice follow-up and send the message and keep like be respectful even if you feel you were disrespected. Yes, that is one aspect of it, and it's annoying having to like treat people their shit as gold even when you don't feel that way. But the more important aspect is how do you not listen? How do you not internalize it? How do you not let it scar you? Right. And I think the key thing to kind of keep in mind is that first line there, which is that their reactions are about them. Like, I wish our story had been different. Fran, I think, like, was really burnt by that, right? Like, Fran and I have a great relationship now. She felt very disrespected on my behalf. She felt disrespected on her own behalf that we weren't really listened to. And here's someone who was a close enough friend that she wrote the first check for them a decade and a half ago, right? And my sense is like, yeah, they've fallen away from each other, but that was a real friendship, right? And now that friendship is kind of burnt because of how we let ourselves internalize. Maybe she was having a bad day, right? Or was feeling like she had really like, this is the third investment she's had this year where it's like, Jesus Christ, if only I had sold 8 years ago or sold X years ago, I would be in so much different a financial position now. And these are yet another people telling me that I was a fool. And it's so, right? Like when people hear that message, it's really hard for them not to react. So
I would
something to
also add another thing, like oftentimes, especially in like, these power differential relationships, like investor and an entrepreneur, it's very easy for your brain to slip into they are not people. And which is why it becomes hard to remember that their reactions are about them. But like thinking about, okay, this is also a person with their own insecurities, with their own worries, with their own cares in the world, can really remind you that, oh, okay, they are upset. But my priority is that I have to do this maybe 10 times in the next 2 weeks. And I need to focus on retaining my emotional energy. It takes something out of you every time you have to present to somebody. It takes something out of you when you have to walk into a meeting where there is a power differential. But remembering that, okay, there will be some power differential, but they are not gods. They are not everything. It's really like, I would say part of it is also that the way we think about money and capitalism and all of the other social stuff around it, it really makes us put people who have money on a pedestal. But just remembering that I don't need to put them on a pedestal. If they are upset, if they are behaving in a way that I wouldn't expect somebody to behave with me or that I'm not used to, just remember that you are maybe having 1, 2, 3 conversations with them. If somebody is rude to you, you're probably not going to continue having this relationship with them. And just that's where, again, like cutting your losses immediately, emotionally, like detaching, okay, this is not about me, this is about them. This relationship probably doesn't matter is one way of doing it. Obviously, you can also say, oh, maybe they are just having a bad day and the next conversation we have might be great. But just not taking it personally is so much more helpful when people are throwing basically their emotional hurt at you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great thing to add. And for those who are listening to that and being like, "Oh, this is what people say in all sorts of sectors," right? I think there's a deliberate reason why we're kind of framing it in that way. It's like bring the strategies you have from your other parts of your life, right? Like all of us are mid-career at this point, I think, right? And it's, how, or even if you're early career, right? Like, how you've been successful to that point. What have you done to pick yourself back up? I mean, fact of being queer in this world is like, you have had to pick yourself back up. And whether it is that you justify it to yourself by saying, hey, it was their problem, not mine. Like, it was, like they were having a bad day. The key is to watch your investment and emotional. Divya's exactly right, but even just thinking about it as like time investment, right? Like, Divya and I work a lot together, obviously, because we run this studio together. And a few days ago, she was calling me on the fact that I'm in the process of negotiating potentially like a fractional role with a startup in India, right? And it's going to be a very senior role. And so I've been going back and forth on it. And finally, I sent this thing, right? Like, I sent a little job description, I sent the voice note to accompany it. And then, what I did is I listened to the voice note, right? And then I listened to it like a few more times. And then at some point, Divya asked me, she was like, are you accounting for your ruminating time when you say, oh, I finished this task in half an hour, or I finished this task in an hour? It's like, absolutely not, right? Like, I was so tired on Tuesday. And why was I so tired? It was because in the morning after I sent that message, I spent half the day thinking about it and like wondering if I should have phrased it differently, and then noticing when it had been sent and not read, right? Or read and not listened to. And like, those things are where it's seeded into you, right? You've absorbed that kind of emotional anxiety from the investor, from the person you were pitching, from wherever else, and now it's sitting with you when you're trying to bring up the energy to go out to the next thing. Um, a real way of solving is absolutely build in the time capacity for it. Like, I think that's Danny suggesting, but it's also just be cognizant of what's happening, right? Like, now that I've talked about it in front of you, Paul, and with Divya a bit, right? Like, it's more obvious to me that I think I'm also playing back some of the anxiety the CEO has, who is hiring me, right? Like, I'm like internalizing that and combining it with my own. Okay, right? I can, first step is be aware of it, and then I can go out and say, how do I not get so burnt by this? Do I journal? What do I do? Okay. I think we've drilled in that point, but there is one other really key part about during the conversation, and that is closing. Right. So this is the other thing that we all run into when we're out there trying to close checks, is that people want to get back to you, people need some more time for something. And it's through a variety of reasons, right? Like, they may not feel like committing today, they may have a longer drawn out process, but a lot of times is they don't feel urgency. So try to create a false sense of urgency, right? If you don't, I'm sure, actually, to skip ahead, right? If you have actual deadlines, absolutely use them, right? There was a time that Tomboy X was raising, whatever, 6 months ago, and we had a debt payment. And we were saying, listen, guys, like, the only way we can go renegotiate the debt is if we can show them we have real interest, we have real investors lined up. And if the debt payment comes due, the business will now have, I think, couldn't make payroll after that debt payment, right? So it had like 1 month to live. So we use the actual deadline of the debt payment. Sure, if we had missed it, could we have taken the money we already had and some letters of intent and gone and used that to negotiate? Probably. But we didn't say that, right? What we said was, we have this deadline that is this external pressure on the business. We need to close this round because of that, right? So that can be really successful. If you don't have that, try and create a sense of urgency, right? So, 80% of the time is gone, like we've raised 67% of our funds remaining. There's only, 18% left. And there's a whole science around how to think about numbers and statistics. Yeah, if you're ever interested, there's a bunch of content out there. I took stats once upon a time, and I was really just amazed at how much statistics is really about telling the story you want to tell, right? You can always fudge numbers, or not. I would not even say fudge numbers. You can tell the numbers in the way to tell the story you want to tell. So as you're thinking about the numbers, as you're thinking about presenting your story, think about creating urgency. And then finally, right, something I was reminding some of my the companies I've invested in India about, and similarly, whenever we're investing across borders or just across cultural groups, there's different holidays that matter for different people, right? Like, in the US, it's not that unusual for us to know that we have to close investments before December 31st, or, charitable contributions or something, right? Like, whenever you want to see a tax benefit in the year, you have to close that in that calendar year. It's not true in other countries, right? India runs on an April 1st to March 31st system. India also has like certain holidays, right? Where it would be, you would do certain kinds of things before the holiday, but not after the holiday. And like specifically like Diwali and the holiday period is kind of like that. But that's true in other cultures too. And so understanding where you have these holidays, like doing just a little bit of research about your investor, and to maybe toot the first workshops we gave this year, we were talking about using AI, and I think we did a workshop where we talked a little bit about deep research. And one of the great use cases for deep research, either just go to chatgpt.com, hit deep research, and say, hey, I'm going to be meeting this person for an investment meeting. Can you help me understand factors that might be important to them? What are their values? What kind of cultural background do they have? And let it go after the races. And maybe after the meeting, you again ask it, hey, I want to help in figuring out what kind of good follow-ups there are. Here's a little summary of the things we talked about. Can you help me figure out good follow-ups, right? Are there any things I might be able to use to help close them? And again, it can be really helpful to use a tool like deep research to go out and get that information you can then use to send to make this thing happen. But notice I'm not saying go out and ask ChatGPT to write it for you, right? Like I do think that we've gotten to a point that all of us are getting inundated by messages that are coming out of LLMs. And it's just, you can tell, right? So I would much more say, go out and use the help to get the content, sharpen what it is you want to say, and then say it. Even if they met you, they talked to you, so they know how articulate you are. You're not going to be a surprise to them at that point. Do you want to add something, Divya? You looked like, okay. Okay. And then finally, the third section I kind of want to talk about today was like, so yes, it's all well and good, during the conversation, how to redirect it, and after the conversation, what do you need to do? But how do we be a little bit more prepared before we get into the conversation? And you'll notice what I have as a subheading here is bring your best self, right? Like it's not always going to be the same one as last time, but it's the best one you have at that moment. So how do you think about it that way? How do you make yourself be the most prepared, the best version of yourself that you can be, given where you are that morning? And yeah, getting a little bit ahead of myself, but it was a good moment. So before about an hour ago, I have a tendency to get a bit anxious before I do these workshops. And it doesn't matter that it's, the eighth one for Start Out or something that we're doing. And it doesn't, and it's crazy because like even when I was CEO and used to run this 65-person ed tech company and like really taught, and we had thousands of tutors, like I would still have this moment of like, oh, what am I like? Is it going to be like, what will happen, right? And the thing that I've realized is that there's a certain amount that will come from just having like the beginning is the hardest part for me, right? Like this notion that I will somehow forget what I'm going to say in the beginning and then not set the context well and then not be able to go into it is what's the hardest part for me. And it's something that Divya also knows. So she just reminded me, she's like, hey, maybe go and just do a practice, right? Just do a little dry run. And I didn't actually do the whole thing, right? I just did the beginning and I wrote down the like 3 points that I know would help me if I needed on the beginning. And it's just it's not how am I going to be more awake today or how am I going to be a different version of myself, but it was like, how can I make this version of myself feel just a little bit more calm, a little bit more comfortable going in? And for me, that's that. So that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about.
I want to add like a very small thing there. I would say that like a lot of times, a lot of advice from different angles would end up coming to something around self-awareness. Whether like, some of our previous stories about like how previous conversations around how would you tell the story of your product or your business or your company, all of that sort of comes to this point of looking at whatever you are trying to communicate honestly, earnestly, and then seeing what are the best parts of it. You can't present the best parts unless you learn how to look at, okay, this is what I do well. So for example, reverse of Karan, I actually work way better when I'm improv. I like, even if I have a presentation, I think like I just do way better and I sound way less rehearsed when I'm just speaking and riffing off the top of my head. And that's just like something that I need to know about myself. Same thing with Karan. Like he works a little bit better if he has thought about the beginning, as he has discovered, right? And so just learning, okay, this is what makes me be my best self. This is what makes my company show up as like, something which is different and special. This is what makes my business stand out. Looking at those things, not what you want it to be. Like I would love to be the kind of person who can prepare a script and present it, but I'm not. I'm sure Karan would love to be the kind of person who, doesn't get nervous before these things. But it's like we all have our own sort of niches, and being able to respect your own niche, it's not better or worse, but being able to respect your own niche is like really important for efficacy around any kind of communication.
Yeah. I mean, and like I assume we are all in the queer community anyway. It's like we're already at so many moments you have to break or create new rules for yourself, right? So like if you have a drag persona and you feel that like it would be better for your drag persona to like show up to the investor meeting, have your drag persona show up to the investor meeting. Like that is what I mean by bring your best self. Like fuck the rules. Okay, so with that though is like anticipating the roadblocks. So as I've been using this example throughout, could I have anticipated that someone might ask about their previous investment? Yes, right? And that was just me being inexperienced at that point in doing these kinds of fundraising. But how could I have done that is by asking people, right? So I think I was in this place where I had a little bit of something to prove. Like my dad has been a serial entrepreneur. My sister runs this women's fashion company, rental company actually called Armoire, which you all should check out. They do kind of like workwear, but right. So like it's these other members of my close family had done this, right? So I was like, I should be able to do this. So instead of kind of talking to them, either of them really, before I went out and did that first pitch, I was like, I want to be able to prove something to myself for the world. And fine, that's fine sometimes, but it doesn't mean that I couldn't ask my sister for someone else I could have talked to, or I could have asked my dad for someone else that like, he has invested in the past that I could have talked to. So try and right, some things are hard for you and accept that, but there still can be a little bit of a way around it that can help you feel more prepared, help you understand what roadblocks might be coming. So yes, I was in retrospect, it's so obvious I should have been able to anticipate that someone would want to know what the present value of their existing shares. But I'm sure all of us, you will also have that moment, right? Where after a meeting, you'll be like, yes, we should have anticipated this. So as much as you can, try and get the information you can, do that beforehand. And then these last two bullets, I think, are also kind of interesting to think about. Like you can think about parts of the story that trip you up in two ways. Like sometimes it's that you feel uncomfortable with some part of it, right? Like maybe you got your first check from a family member, or maybe it was somehow like, there's these myths that we tell ourselves about what it means to build a company in America that like, oh, it's by like blood, sweat, and tears. I don't know, maybe you like worked for someone who died and then you inherited their business, right? So maybe there's some parts of the story that trip you up. And I think it's worth sitting with those, right? Whether that means that then you can figure out that this is a place I want to go into more detail and I'm not being able to do justice to it. Or it's like I was talking about earlier, that focus on the parts that make you good, that make you look good, right? And address them, right? Like don't not acknowledge it. Be like, yes, that again, you don't necessarily it's important to lead people to the place you want them to ask questions versus assuming they're going to get there themselves, right? And that's a point that I talked about a little bit earlier, but it's a point I would again mention here. Like you don't need to lead people to the places that are going to be troublesome for you. It's not lying and omitting. It's not in these kinds of contexts. There's already so many shades of truth. And then by telling the parts of the truth that are helpful, you're not going to make you a bad person, right? It's going to make you, in some ways, like playing a little bit of the game that unfortunately we are playing in capitalism these days. And I think kind of with that, there's a bunch of fears that also come, right? These are big groupings. I think that especially for us when we are going out to make our first kind of conversations, a lot of these really feel very strong, especially that notion of imposter syndrome, especially that notion of social judgment. That are we, what is it? What kind of person am I if I'm going out and taking money from my friends, especially if I then lose that money, right? And that fear is a fear of judgment. It's a fear of the judgment you yourself may cast. It's a judgment that your community may cast. Unfortunately, right, some of these, they are the growth that you have to get in your life, right? Like, and it will be growth that will come regardless. Like I was kind of saying a few minutes ago, as much as you can, take the learnings you have from other places and bring them here. So you have faced imposter syndrome in other parts in your work. I'm 100% certain we all have, right? You walked into a room and felt like you didn't belong. How can you transpose that here? What did you do in that situation to get yourself to feeling like you belonged? And maybe that meant that you did it 6 times before you felt like it. So go out and do it 6 times with ones that feel less big. Go out. Maybe it's not easy for you to have, a friend of your father's like I could, but there is a community like Start Out that you would be able to find mentors that you could pitch to. So you can anticipate that first 5 pitches are learning pitches. They're pitches so that your imposter syndrome gets softened. And then the sixth pitch is the one that you're actually going to try and hit it out of the park, right? The first few, you like, I don't know, you bunt. I really shouldn't go into sports metaphors too far, right? Like maybe in the first two, you're like trying to make base, and then you're like actually trying to like hit a home run. I think I did that. That seemed good. And then I think, for me, one of the big things that helped with like accomplishing social, or dealing with like this feeling of judgment, and dealing with that moment where you feel like, hey, I fucked up. Like, now, how do I not get stuck in it, right? And for me, that's like one of the hard moments where it's like, oh, I was trying to pitch this thing, now I've said the wrong thing, and now all of a sudden I'm sweating and like I'm totally all over the place. So how do I bring myself back and not judge myself for that? And I've found actually like I'm learning dance. It's an Indian classical dance I'm learning. It's called Kathak. It's like a super high, it is a difference whether your hand is like this or like this, right? So like there's a lot of ways to fuck up. And I find it really scary. Like I find a certain aspect of performance scary. I don't like doing things I'm not good at. But by putting myself in a situation that's relatively low stakes, right? Like I don't even expect myself to be a great dancer. No one expects me to be a great dancer. I mean, maybe I do a little bit because I expect myself to be great at everything because I am that kind of person. But I'm putting myself in that situation where I'm struggling a bit, right? And so it's building that scab. It's the scary thing that I'm doing in a place that's not as scary. Sure, it's still a little bit scary, and that's why it matters, but it's not as scary. And that helps me build that fear and be able to then transpose it to these situations.
I would also add a tiny thing. So there is a friend of mine here in India. She has like a lot of investing, and like she was a VC for a while, and then like she was with a fintech company. She has a lot of experience, and recently she's been trying to build a financial services plus debt fund kind of business. And I've been helping her figure out her story. A homework that I gave her was every morning record a voice note of what your story is to yourself. Listen to it the next morning and now revise and record another one to yourself. And the interesting thing about that is sometimes even just repeating the story to yourself again and again can also build the scab. Not by doing it in your head. No, you have to say it, you have to judge it. A lot of the judgment, we are also afraid of our own judgment. So exposing yourself to even your own judgment, even like people who like I know that even if I come up with something really atrocious or stupid, I can come and talk about it to Karan, and he'll be like, "Oh my God, I love this!" 5% part of it, even if 95% of it is garbage, he will be like able to figure out what is good, and he'll be able to help me see that and find some of those people around you, and then find some of more softer, higher stakes things. So maybe your friends who are maybe investors, maybe they are not, I don't know, but people who do put you in that position, okay, I want to perform, but maybe not 100%, you're performing 10%, 90%, even if you're not doing the thing of, okay, my first 5 pitches are going to be whatever, just put yourself in the position of trying it again and again. And that would really, really make the before a lot better.
Yeah, that was a perfect lead into this slide. So I changed it while Divya was talking. But again, something I think you heard in what Divya was saying, and even I found kind of in learning dance, that yes, performance can be a practice, right? Like you can improve dramatically from performance, but there's a separate thing of practice. And sometimes there are gaps that we have. There are places that we need to strengthen. I had a teacher in, oh God, primary school, right? But she used to stand in the back of the room and we would count times you said filler words, right? And it was Yes, like it was a very low stakes. You could say that those were performance. I think we were giving like oral book reports. I mean, this was sixth standard, it was forever ago, but they were effectively a practice, right? They were helping us become more aware of a certain aspect of it in a relatively low stakes environment. And I think what you were hearing from Divya's story with her friend is that's a practicing telling your story, practicing articulating it, and then hearing where does it not sound right. So practice is great. Practice will make you more resilient. And then acknowledging places that you have gaps and looking to strengthen those. Maybe you do feel like your volume modulation is very poor and you feel you could speak louder and more articulately. Well, like there are vocal coaches. I'm blessed to live in New York City where there's literally thousands of them, but they're also online. And that can be a place where you can become stronger. But one of the ways it really will be identified for you is through that practice aspect, whatever it looks like for you, however you can kind of get the feedback in order to understand what is strong and what needs some amount of improvement.
It would also, like, the practice cycle also helps you figure out what you are, again going back to the older point, what are you good at? So are you the kind of person who really flows well with numbers? Are you the kind of person who really relates to the person they are speaking to? Are you the kind of person who actually understands the user or customer needs of your business so deeply that nobody else knows it? Or even in your presentation style, are you somebody who just works better verbally? Are you somebody who works better with a deck or with a note? Or like, there are so many different variations, and the only way to figure out the best version is to try them.
Cool. So that is the large and short of what we wanted to talk about today. I am going to look back at our chat and see if there were some questions that I could kind of address here. Yeah, I think the one Danny brought up around I just asked for money again. How do I ask for some again? That is a roadblock, right? Like that's how I would think about it. That is something where you are going to have a reasonable story. If you're coming back to someone 6 months after you have just raised money from them, well, what happened? Right? So is it that you spent all that money and it didn't work and now we need more money again because we are like on the verge of bankruptcy? Or is it that, hey, we were able to go out and grow the business in this way and now we're going to be able to grow the business more? That's a really different conversation. I'm an investor in this company called Humanly out of Seattle, and he actually did that, right? I think if I remember correctly, he raised maybe a $3 or $4 million round last November. And then in March, he raised, I think, a $10 or $12 million round in a week. And it was because he went back to all of his investors and he showed them what had happened over the last 2 months. And he closed it almost immediately. So that's a really different conversation. And I would say it's not that helpful to kind of frame it in your mind as like, oh, like I burned this bridge by asking for money. It's you brought someone onto this journey with you. And as much as it's possible, I think thinking about it as you guys are on this journey together versus it being you have to control the flow of information to them and you're presenting a certain version of the truth to them. Sure, when you're trying to make the story and tell the story, like, yes, you want to tell a story that's resonant with them and they will pay attention to. But once you guys are on the ship, it's hard for me to justify it that I think it's worth the time and energy. Like your investors are in there with you. So as much as possible, use them to your advantage versus it being like another worry point in the system.
Actually, Michael, the point that you made, this was something, so the contract that Karan said, like he's been thinking about a lot. We're already working with them, helping them with product. And a few weeks back, I went with them in a bunch of investor meetings. And both the founders are very operational people. Like one person is from business and one person is from ops. And both of them really would get into the weeds of the details. Like, okay, we're going to do this, and this is where the thing is going to come from, and this is what's going to happen, and that's what's going to happen. And very honestly, investors don't get it and they don't care and they shouldn't care. They need to care about looking at your business and looking at you and thinking, okay, on a broad level, over the next 5 years, is this thing going to make me money? That's what the investor's skill set lies in. You, as the business owner, your skill set lies in figuring out how to grow your business. Those are very different things. I understand that like there is this temptation that, oh, there is this really cool thing that I'm doing, or like, I want to help you understand what I'm doing, but it just sort of distracts them. I wouldn't even say that like it's overwhelming or not. It's not useful information for them. You spent probably like 10 years in your industry more to try and synthesize all of this knowledge that you're now constructing into a business. They haven't had that depth. So I would say that like just thinking about your story from the perspective of what are the three key insights that you are bringing to this business, and just driving those in. And there, if you need to get into some operational detail, that's great, but like just talking about what makes you special, what makes the way you have constructed your business special, any of those things, right? Like I don't know what you are into, but like let's say that you are into construction, maybe you have some insight around material, maybe you have some insight around design, maybe you have some insight around financing or around like longevity. Thinking about what is your special insight. In Indian VC ecosystem, they call it like, what's your buy side insight and what's your sell side insight. And just like thinking from that perspective, it can be annoying as an entrepreneur because you know so much more, but being able to be succinct about what is your actual insight also, I would say, keeps a strong compass for yourself as you are trying to build your business and your story.
Yeah, and I think. Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I was just saying thanks. That is helpful. And it does remind me, just the reason why I got into what I'm doing is because of my past experience, and there is a story there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was just going to say that I think if you haven't, the workshop we did last month was about curating your story. And I feel like one of the things I kind of talked about was just that, yeah, there will be a different version of your story for the different kinds of investors you're meeting. So maybe, yeah, to take a look at that. If it's not helpful, or even if it is helpful, feel free to like shoot one of us a message, LinkedIn, here, anywhere. Okay, let's come to Ola's question. I don't mean to be dodging it. So yeah, I mean, the reason I think was hesitating about answering is because it could be really a whole workshop in itself. I think the big kind of thing to kind of keep in mind, and here I'll just bring back that link in case anyone does want to book it, is why are you doing this, right? And why should we be paying attention to you doing this, right? Like in this space, there's some aspect, even if say you're a nonprofit trying to offer services that are, maybe already offered by other kinds of organizations. There's a reason why you are moving to put the time and energy in to build this business. So I talk about that, right? Like maybe it's a question of access, that you feel like certain communities have not been accessed, that you can help access. Maybe it's even just a question of like morals, right? That you feel that this is the right thing to be doing. And I think once you can kind of figure out what is it that's bringing you into that space, what makes you feel that your approach is special, then you can start to see, can I build resonance around that? And I think, yeah, a little bit, I would also maybe send you to as I was talking, I was like, I've said these words before, and I remember this also in the workshop I did last month a little bit. It's just talking about how do you find those things that make you special, and then figuring out how do you build your story around them. But I would say the thing to start from, if you're thinking about starting from scratch with fundraising, don't think about it as saying starting from scratch in fundraising. Say I'm starting from scratch in like telling the story of my specialness, right? And how am I telling that story in a way that's resonant with these people that I'm hoping investing with me? I feel that framing is more helpful than it being like this kind of fundraising kind of like amorphous problem.
Yeah, because you're not really, again, like similar to what I said for Michael also, you're not starting from scratch in running your business. You're probably deeply familiar with the domain, with like, whatever is required there, what makes the industry, whatever it is. So just like bringing those insights to the front will make you not feel like you're starting from scratch, because the truth is you're not starting from scratch.
Thanks so much. So yeah, that's very, very helpful, actually. That's really very helpful.
Happy to hear it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. As always, Karan and Divya, thank you so much for sharing everything that you do with us, folks. We still have time if you have any questions to drop into the chat, or feel free to unmute. I did want to highlight that I dropped into the chat a feedback form for you to share some feedback about your experience with this workshop. as well as the link to the fundraising series that we've done. So this is the 4th workshop that we've had with Karan and Divya and Joyous Studios. So all of the previous recordings are linked there if you would like to go back and watch them. And once this recording is updated, we will put that there and make sure that that gets out to everybody. Fantastic.
Well,
All
it was
right.
fun as always. Love getting to chat with people. Yeah, and Startup has a great community, so we always appreciate the people we meet through it.
We appreciate having you all. Have a great rest of your day. We'll make sure to see you at the following Start Out event.
Bye-bye. Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone.